Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this February. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can catch my show every day from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Today, I'd like to discuss an article that I read, and I'll give a number of comments on it, as well as delving into a few stories regarding the Vatican and the Jesuit order. But the headline of my show today is The Jesuits, Ebola, and Beheadings. What's with all these beheadings lately? Now, let's look at this from a different angle. Now, black magic Freemasonry. Okay, we've always on this show connected Freemasonry to the Jesuit order in the Vatican, and I do that factually by stating that in 1982, several articles came out in the French and Italian newspapers implicating over 150 high-level bishops and cardinals as being members of Masonic lodges. Now, this story never did filter over to America, but some of the notable names were Father Paul Marcinkus. His code name, Freemasonry code name, was Gorilla, because he was a big man, big 6'4", 240. He was the Pope's bodyguard before he became the Vatican Bank president. And I might add, he had no qualifications to be a financier, but outside of the fact that he was a good money launderer and had good connections in the mafia, etc. Now, knowing that the Vatican and Freemasonry work together, and that the front that the Vatican uses is to say that they oppose Freemasonry, that's given to us. Let's look at the arrival of all these beheadings in ISIS today from a different angle. All right, black magic Freemasonry has a symbol for degrees 9 through 11. Now, we know that they have let's go up to 33 degrees. Some people say they go higher. But anyway, there's steps that you get to, to be illuminated. Okay? Now, between every one of these steps has symbols. And like I said, symbols are very important to the occult, to the Vatican, to Freemasonry, to Obama, to Bush, to all of these guys. And the symbol of black magic Freemasonry for degrees 9 through 11. Quite interesting. They chose 9/11, right, for the World Trade Center date to do their dirty work there. But the symbols depict a decapitated head by a short sword, a symbol depicting the destruction of the old order. So the new world order can be established. Now, let's just take an aside here. It'd be very interesting to look at the Shriners and all of their Muslim symbolry that they use, their symbolic hats and all their signs that they put on their hats. And you should look at the Shriners and see why I would state that they seem to be worshiping Allah. But anyway, decapitation, heralded ISIS's gruesome arrival in the Middle East and on American TV stations. Great for ratings, isn't it? Hey, Margaret, let's watch some beheadings today. Let's turn on Fox. Let me see how many we could see there. Oh, let's watch some on CNN. Now, what is going on? Why is beheading suddenly appearing in the news? And you see it every day. I.e., an example, all the news broadcasts brought to us that 20 Egyptian Christians were beheaded by ISIS on a beachfront. Then we recently heard that 90 Christians have been taken into captivity and kidnapped by ISIS. We don't know their fate yet, but I could give you a guess right now. But let's look at this from a different angle. The occult Freemasons and the Vatican, who exert tremendous control view beheading as a significant occult political ritual that will establish the Jesuit Vatican-led New World Order. Now, the occult belief that beheading can assist the arrival of the fascist order isn't just curiosity. It takes on immense importance to Americans. And I state this yesterday because I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and I laid out a pretty good scenario for this gentleman of what I was talking about. And it was one of the few occasions where I didn't get eyes rolling. And perhaps it's the topic, beheadings are nice, but as long as they don't happen in my neighborhood. But anyway, this takes on immense importance to Americans. This is true since the U.S. government, with its Black Ops budget, now who's going to deny there's a Black Ops budget, has purchased and installed. Now, did you know this? Over 1,000 guillotines in over 1,000 FEMA UN boxcars with shackles. Now, that to me, if I said that to somebody on the street, they go, Greg, what have you been smoking? However, I sometimes rely on certain information, and this one, I think, I'd have to say I'll believe in these FEMA cars, but do we have guillotines already installed there? Somebody, let's find out before we get our heads cut off. And to add administrative and legal authority to their use, though, if they're there, the UN, run by the Vatican, I might add. And by the way, there's an empty seat in the UN. And, with every chair has members and they all have numbers, but there's an empty chair for the Vatican and it's 666. I mean, isn't that interesting? And we all know what 666 is, don't we? And to add administrative and legal authority to their use, the UN, of course, run by the Vatican, and look at we got Rockefeller involved with them, who funded Hitler's genocide. Then we have the Rothschilds, who are the Vatican bankers. They inserted a code into Obamacare for, quote, legal death by execution, which includes beheading or decapitation. This coding was placed there by the Department of Homeland Security, established after the U.S. UK false flag attack, Vatican attack on the World Trade Center on 9/11. Now, Israel, to me, is run by the Jesuits, and Mossad basically is their version of our CIA, but our country is run by the Jesuits as well. And then this article that I'm referring to cites my article regarding the Jesuits and their connections. And I won't go into what I said, but you can go to my website and get all my articles. So we have this strange thing going on. Now, for thorough information, on Jesuits' beginnings in Babylon and Egypt and all their occult connections and all their presidents they have killed and much more, I could give you a number of books, and if you go to my website, you can get a lot of that. It's arcticbeacon.com, and I apologize I haven't been updating it. I'm in the process of doing that now. Now, let's look a little more closely at this. Now, we have enough information on who is controlling everything behind the scenes in order to establish this fascist New World Order. But we can't stop just reacting to beheadings, but step back and look at who is responsible for most beheadings, as well as the ritual significance of beheadings for the occult Jesuits in the Vatican. Now, when you turn on Fox News or CNN, you hear that it's the Muslims that started that when they were fighting the Christians, and it was them who came up with beheadings. But I had presented articles and information along with others who can show you possibly that the Vatican actually created Islam. And that's an interesting study. But you're not going to get that from these guys who are hiding the truth from you. They don't want you to even talk about this history. All you need to know, according to them, is that Muslims behead people in the name of Allah, and they want to kill you, and that's all. And everybody else, you're the good guys, the Vatican are the good guys, and they're the bad guys. But let's look at it from a different point. And looking back historically, what else the Jesuits have been doing in the world in terms of many other grotesque tortures, including waterboarding and deaths, beheadings, begin to fall into a fuller context. Yes, they were involved in all this stuff, right? Now, the world has been subjected to this for the last, just all of a sudden out of the clear blue sky about 3 or 4 months ago, I don't know, maybe a little longer, I wake up and I hear ISIS all the time, ISIS, ISIS, ISIS. As if, our intelligence never knew about them before, and we couldn't do anything about this earlier. They were just like they give us the story that 3 Arab terrorists brought down the biggest air force and protected zone in our country. ISIS just automatically appeared, and we had no idea. It's orchestrated, folks. So ISIS and its beheadings are being used by the U.S. And the government to scare the hell out of us and to place us in fear. And when they create this enemy, they've got a solution for it. However it's going to be dissolved, they're going to be the big protectors. But the ISIS beheadings are a minute comparison to confirmed Vatican beheadings of infants and children at a Catholic home for unwed mothers in Ireland. The decapitated and dismembered bodies of 800 babies and children were found stuffed in a cistern in Tuam. Now, let me read some of this to you. Now, Judy Byington, on June 12th, 2014, reported from Ireland, and here's what she reported. Decapitated, dismembered children in Catholic mass gravesite were ritually murdered. Marks on the bones of nearly 800 children found in a Roman Catholic nun's septic tank indicated they had been ritually killed by a source within the Irish Garda police force, revealed this week, and that was in June. The informant told 5 judges of the International Common Law Court of Justice in Brussels, whatever that is, that forensic, that might have something to do with Kevin Nett, I don't know. But anyway, experts have confirmed that decapitation and dismembered babies in mass graves resembled the usual signs of ritualistic murder. Last week, death certificates were released on the 796 Irish children, ages 2 months to 9 years, found in a cistern at Catholic St. Mary Mothers and Babies Home near Tuam. Now, is there any crack investigative reporter at ABC, CBS, New York Times checking this out? I want to know if this story is true. Now, the forensic evidence appeared to link the children's death to the global elite Ninth Circle Satanic Child Sacrifice cult network. Since last month, Roman Catholic and Irish government officials have been named by witnesses as members of the Ninth Circle Satanic Child Sacrifice cult. These children weren't just cut up, they were massacred. The policeman from the Irish Garda told the court. Now, somebody's telling the truth here, and somebody isn't. Now, if somebody isn't telling, I like to present stories like this in this manner on this show. If they're not telling the truth, they got an axe to grind with the Vatican. If they are telling the truth, it's being covered up by the media. And, so let's look at this a little deeper. Now, let me add, though, that in many of the stories that I've done in the past, we've heard, which somehow get forgotten about. We have covered on this show stories about the genocide in Canada of all these children that were killed or put in insane asylums with the Vatican complicity in their orphanages to do horrendous testing, the Nazi-type testing, and that's been confirmed. Bodies have been dug up. It's just amazing, and nothing happens. Then we find the genocide of the American Indians, the same thing going on, and we had people on my show, person on my show, who had told us that she'd witnessed, when she was a girl, a baby being buried under the church's altar, a Catholic church, and there was never any investigations done. There's no statute of limitations on murder. So this seems to be a pattern. And the stories I'm talking about in America with the genocide of the American Indians at the hands of the Jesuit mission schools and at the hands of the Canadian natives by the Jesuit mission schools leads me to believe it's taken place in other parts of the world. And then if you add on that the horrendous stories, we've had Sister Charlotte's testimony on this show talking about the horrendous treatment of nuns in cloistered monasteries. I mean, unbelievable torture and death. So you might want to give this story a little bit of credibility. So we have the story coming out of Ireland. The Catholic Jesuit order, now listen to this, dated, what is it? I'm sure they're, what are they going to say? Oh, yeah, we're involved in this, of course. But anyway, I wanted to bring that story to you to let you know that these beheadings aren't just exclusively in the domain of ISIS. And ISIS, these atrocities are just amazing, and we are here now listening to them every day. And where's this leading? Is it leading to a huge war? It could be. So while the public's attention is being put on corporate media on these beheadings by the supposed Muslim group, which is actually, I believe, trained and put into power by the West, and whether you like it or not, we get stories coming from some of these. It's always these retired generals who come out and say, "Well, our allies and friends." This was General Wesley Clark. He's one of these talking former generals. The only reason they talk is they can't. I guess they can't go so far where they lose their pension, but they're allowed to buck the system a little more once they're retired, I guess. But he said that actually how ISIS got created was by our allies and friends who funded them to get rid of Hezbollah, another terrorist group that was causing havoc in Israel. And, it's all an orchestrated effort, however you want to admit it. I mean, they got, 300 Exocet missiles now, ISIS? Where do they get those? I mean, come on. I mean, the other day I was watching the news, and they're armed with our weapons. But isn't that kind of interesting? We go in there, we leave everything. Why don't we take our stuff? Kids are taught to take their toys home with them after they're out playing. Right? You go to the sandbox with your little truck and your little Jeep and your little army soldiers and your little games, and your mother tells you, "Johnny, bring your toys home." Well, why doesn't the military bring their toys home? They leave everything. I mean, how many tanks I'm watching these terrorist groups. They look like, American military with black hoods on. It's all our military. They leave it there. And that's our taxpayer money. We ought to demand that if we're going to get involved in a war, you got to bring your tanks back. You don't leave them there to arm the enemy when we leave. Bring your toys home, boys. That's all I'm asking. But so we have this corporate media. They're not focused on anything more than this war that's being created and scaring the hell out of Americans so that we get controlled left and right. Now, I believe that the Vatican has been involved in this story ever since the Crusades, and I believe that they've been orchestrating stuff like this for thousands of years. And the corporate media, of course, is not focused on the Vatican at all. They're the good guys. They're the friends, Remember, that all started, that whole change Started in the 60s, when they started 50s, when they came out with all the, right after World War II, and they had kind of a bad reputation, and there were still some Protestants who wanted to kick them out of the country, because of their views on killing Bible, in the past they used to torture and burn to death Bible believers, Christians, like many of you in this country. Now they call themselves Christians because they've changed. Now, come on. Aren't they going to ever be held responsible for anything? No. All you like to watch is Bing Crosby in My Way. Come on. And, I'm not saying there aren't a few good, priests out there that don't know what the hell's going on. Of course, that's their front. But give me a break. When you look at the hierarchy, this is a corrupt organization. So the corporate media is really not focused on the beheading slaughter of innocents. No, Vatican's job here, what they're really doing in these satanic cults all around the world involved with high level of fish, who knows who these guys are. But the Irish government and the Roman Catholic Church may have commenced a cover-up by closing off the child mass grave site. Yes. And announcing their own in-house investigation. This is what was going on in Ireland, okay? And that's usually what they do. Now, I remember there was a story when we were working on a story in Canada with the genocide and the Vatican involvement there of the genocide of all these kids in these schools. They'd put them, the orphanages. They'd have all these kids, and then they'd throw them into insane asylums, and the nuns would sign off that all these kids were insane. And they were all working together. And then we find atrocities going on in those insane asylums, the Canadian government and the Vatican working together. And there were grave sites, mass grave sites, pinpointed by eyewitnesses, a couple who were still living. One guy who was on my show, his job was that as a young child or a kind of a teenager, he would have to carry all the bodies or in a wheelbarrow or something and dump the kids into a hole. So he pinpointed where it was. And basically when they were excavating the property, what they did was they found the Vatican had sold the area to the government, who put over a parking lot to cover this up. So they put a parking lot for a state building to cover this up. One of the workers had found some bones, and then the cover-up really began because they were human bones. And the Vatican said, no, they were bones of animals. And then the government gets involved, and they cover up the whole story, and they do their own investigation. So what you have to do is you have to look at this story and what's going on with ISIS from just a little bit different angle. And you have to start out by trying to get your research head around the beginning of Muhammad and the Muslims and where all this came from, the beginnings of Catholicism and where they came from, and then how Catholicism differs from Christianity. And so we have a definite difference. And, I kind of look at it this way. We have openly, in the years past, we had Catholicism and Christianity fighting one another, if you look back at history. And the real reason is that the Vatican traditions and their relentless approach at killing people who wanted to read the Bible put them at odds with people that wanted to basically worship God through the Word. And what happened was, during the Reformation, the Vatican created the Jesuit order for the Inquisition. The Jesuit order was created to basically be the Pope's army and head up all efforts to wipe out Protestantism. But when the Gutenberg press, and they couldn't keep the Bible out of the hands of people, they had to change their tactics a little bit. And over the years, the tactics are now, I'll get into those in the second half hour on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS crosstheborder.org to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal for a second half hour on this Friday, February 27th, 2015 day on our calendar. We're looking at this, the rise of ISIS and all these beheadings that are put in front of us on the news now. But it's nothing new to the Jesuits in Vatican. They've been beheading children and popes and other people for years, performing rituals, what about the Inquisition torture chambers, in which the blood of murdered infants also has been drunk? Yes. But we have distinct groups here, folks. We can't lump the Vatican in with Christianity. So we got Christianity, who was at the mercy of the Vatican, and we all know about the millions of people that were slaughtered just because they wanted to read the Bible and worship God in their own manner. So we have the Vatican, which is a distinct group. They call themselves Roman Catholics. And we have Christianity. Then we have Islam. That's the three entities we're dealing with here. The news media will confuse you and state that Catholicism and Christianity are one and the same, but they're not. Different histories. And you might add, the Vatican's been in the middle of beheading and burning Christians. And then we have Islam, and the Vatican there was fighting that enemy supposedly on behalf of Christianity, which to me was a ruse. And there's a good possibility that Muhammad, who came about in the 700s, was created by that very group to create an enemy. And that's been their MO ever since. They're always creating enemies, and somehow they are just kind of left out of the picture, aren't they? But anyway, the OSS-CIA, now look at this, was formed in the National Security Act, the same agency that employed hundreds of Nazis, and has been in alliance with the Vatican through the various agency connections. I believe the CIA-Vatican alliance that assassinated Pope John Paul I when I got there a year after, okay, did that to JFK, and before that, before the CIA was ever founded, when we look back at history, the Vatican was nailed to the cross, so to speak, on the death of Abraham Lincoln. And that, I'm not making this stuff up, folks. Go check the history books. You ain't going to check them in our high school or college history books because they've sanitized those. But when you start really looking at the facts of Abe's death, you'll find that there was a hit team. One of the members was hid out at the Vatican till he was apprehended, and that's when we broke off any kind of diplomatic relations with them. Until, guess when? Good old Ronald Reagan comes in and opens the door again for diplomatic relations with our good buddies over at Georgetown University. Now, I think the Jesuits and the Vatican and Freemasonry are very well connected through beheadings, too, not just the Muslims. And like I said at the beginning of the show, black magic Freemasonry has a symbol for degrees 9 through 11. And is that a coincidence that the World Trade Center was brought down on 9/11? What that symbol is a decapitated head by a short sword, which is the Muslim sword, isn't it? A group, a symbol depicting the destruction of the old order. So the New World Order, the Vatican-led New World Order, can be established. Abominable, gruesome acts. Look at some of these in huge numbers. You're not going to hear about this. When, the other day I was listening to Fox News and they were talking about, these beheadings go all the way back to the Crusades. That's all they want to do. And they look at the Crusades and they go, look, we were fighting for good back then, and these Muslim terrorists were trying to kill us, behead us back then. But, abominable. And they forget this. And the gruesome acts in huge numbers are not new to the Vatican. The Vatican has been mass murdering people around the world in grisly, appalling fashion. Let's go back to the 1400s. Now, Europe's Great War of 1914 to 18 does not deserve to be called the First World War. The title should go to the first real global conflict in Europe. The Vatican ordered genocidal invasion of other regions that began in the final decade of the 15th century. European historians have sought to downplay the ferocity, extent and significance of that earlier conflict. A decade. Look at some of this research that came out on Global Research. After Columbus landed on Hispaniola in 1492, its indigenous people were extinct. They had done nothing to deserve that fate. Columbus, in a letter to his royal sponsors in Spain, said they were loving, uncovetous people with good features and beautiful eyes, who neither carried weapons nor understood the use of such things. Yet many were tortured to death in a vain attempt to get them to reveal non-existent hoards of gold, and others worked to death or driven to suicide. Such gratuitous violence continued as Europeans, Jesuits in the Vatican, extended their domains in the New World. Oh, yeah. Now, notice the relation to the Vatican's Inquisition, its tortures and burning people alive, to the description of what was going on, and they've got pictures of what was going on with the conquistadors who were in cahoots with the Vatican back then. In South America, the conquistadors, who were to seek out gold for the Jesuits' Vatican, engaged in zestful mass murder that is no equivalent to this day. Bartolomeu de Casas, 1484 to 1566, a Spaniard who went to the New World for fortune, but was driven by the atrocities he witnessed to enter the church, left a vivid description in a book he wrote, a short report on the destruction of the Indies. And let me just read this to you. One time the Indians came to meet us and to receive us with victuals and delicate cheer, and with all entertainment, 10 leagues from a great city, and being come at the place, they presented us with a great quantity of fish and bread and other meat, together with all they could do for us to the uttermost. The conquistadors put them all to the sword, without any cause whatsoever. More than 3,000 souls, which were set before us, men, women, and children, committing great cruelties that never any man living either have or shall see the like. The Christians, with their horses and swords and lances, and the point I'm trying to make here is we have a difference between the Vatican and Christianity. They penetrated into the country and spared neither children, nor the aged, nor pregnant women, nor those in child labor. They made bets as to who would sit a man in two and cut off his head at one blow. Or they opened up his bowels They tore babies from their mothers' breasts by the feet and dashed their heads against the rocks. They spitted the bodies of the other babes together with their mothers and who were before them on their swords. They cut off their hands. They generally killed the lords and nobles in the following way. They made wooden gridirons of stakes, bound them up upon them, and made a slow fire beneath. Thus the victims gave up the spirit by degrees, emitting cries of despair in their torture. Vatican-led atrocities. How about the Jesuits in the Vatican, the Anglican Church, and the British monarchy, all connected to murders that defy the imagination? In terms of grotesqueness, in Australia and New Zealand, the killing was less zestful, but it was more comprehensive. The Anglican Church and British authorities looked the other way as settlers in Australia hunted the Aborigines like animals. And there was mass murder throughout. The intentional famines, we know a number of those. And my big dog Max wants to go outside, but you got to wait a few minutes. Lay down. Come on. You got to lay down. And so we have all of this going on. And we forget. I'm looking at, the Great Famine that was orchestrated in 1876 to 78 in India. Unbelievable stuff. We have the famine in Ireland. In Africa and Asia, death tolls were larger. What about the Rwanda genocide? The Vatican nailed to the wall in the 90s, and this being involved in this genocide. How about the one in Croatia right after World War I? I've done many, many stories on the Vatican's connections to that. I mean, it's irrefutable what they've done. And we give them a pass, and we call them Christians. It's not the case. And I believe that a lot of ISIS has to do with the creation of this enemy for the same reason. Now, while Catholic monarchs have funded these slaughters, it was all done in the name of the Holy Mother Church, the Society of Jesus, which profited. Yes, you know what? Entire tribes of Western American Indians were annihilated under the direct orders of the brown-robed butchers. Coronado and his Spanish conquistadors in the 1519s to the 1540s, not to mention the Aztecs, the Incas of Mexico, Central and South America, Cuba, Haiti, Grenada, Guam, Philippines, with the likes of Almagro, Cortez, Pizarro, Valverde de Mesa, Gregorio Sepulveda, Valega, and yes, Christopher Columbus. Imprisoned by Queen Isabella of Spain for his atrocities against the natives of Grenada, robbing them of all their natural wealth. In the late Middle Ages, discoveries, the Vatican Jesuits viewed all natives of all Americas as indigenous natural slaves. We have huge stories about the Vatican slave trade. And folks, I have gone through great pains to tell you they have not changed. And their tactics have changed. But we've seen through the Council of Trent, Vatican II, the recent councils in the 60s, that the same doctrines apply to heretics. And if we add fuel to the fire, let's really get down to who created Islam and for what reason. Sure, when you roll a bloody rock down a hill, it's going to take on the resemblance of the people who are actually rolling that rock. But who pushed it initially? That's the key question. Now, in 1960, you could read in any public library books detailing Vatican Jesuit atrocities. Many of you young people weren't even born in the 60s. Throughout the European Middle Age, Dark Age of Inquisitions. Since 1960, there has been a systematic removal of all publications after web pages like this. There'll be something coming out on the web, but how that's dealt with now, even by Alex Jones and his compadres of controlled media. They're the controlled opposition on the internet. They make it look like you're crazy. But when you look since the 60s, there has been a systematic removal of all publications after, confessions of the, what about example? Confession, not to mention Burke McCarty's book on the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, C.T. Wilcox's book on that, but what about in the Library of Congress? This has been taken, Confessions of the Conspirators to Lincoln's Assassination, evidencing a systematic takeover of all our education. Remember, the book burnings of Berlin in 1933. It's the same here, but they do it in a little different manner. And all in the name of the Holy Mother Church of Rome, which I might add is not Christianity. Max, you're staying inside. He wants to go out so bad, but he can't until I'm done. That's it. I can't get away from the mic. That's it, Max. The deaths, looking at all this stuff that was going on during the Inquisitions, the deaths in Asia were astronomical. And the riches, guess what? Went right back to the Vatican. The Vatican, Portuguese and Spanish, as well as the rest of Europe, saw the New World as land to exploit and the native infidel people to subjugate. Vast amounts of stolen gold, silver, precious gems, and other natural resources contributed to the construction of decorative cathedrals and churches, with spires in the Iberian Peninsula, as well as the Vatican. And Max, he's not making it easy on me today. Max, we got about 10 minutes, so you got to keep cool. Sit. Come here. You won't let me go. Okay, Max. You're going to, he's going to make me go out, so we're going to take about a 30-second break here. You're not going to hear much on the air while I take Max outside because he's not letting me do my show. And this is what live radio is all about, so I'll be right back in about 30 seconds. All right. We're back. They had to get outside, so that's what live radio is all about. And Max now is outside on the porch, letting me finish. I guess he got tired of hearing about all these atrocities. In fact, human beings are the only ones that would do this. Animals would never behead another one. They may eat something if they're left alone and prey on others just for food, but they're not as bad as us, that's for sure. And the riches from the time of history all go back to the Vatican. And next week I'll do a show on how rich they really are today and how that still goes on. Now, the Portuguese and Spanish, as well as the rest of Europe, saw the New World, like I said, as land to exploit. The Portuguese monopolized the outward flow of slaves. Vatican was involved in slave trade. Slavery saw the rise of European capitalism. European banks, along with joint stock corporations, kings, monarchs, popes, controlled by the Jesuits, controlled lands, resources, and labor. The atrocities committed by Portuguese and Spanish go beyond description. Verbal and written representation cannot be relied upon as accurate representation. Incessant warfare, sadism, treachery, fratricide, abduction, lawlessness, an obsession with the supernatural, coupled with the monarch's indifference and the Jesuit Vatican's hold on the masses through spiritual horror. Unbelievable. So what I'm getting at here, this is not anti-American, this is not anti-West, this is not anti-anything. This is the facts that went down in history, and the point I'm trying to make is we cannot lump the Vatican in with Christianity, and we have to look at this organization and the occult they're involved with today, and the world leaders who I believe are all working for this Vatican-led New World Order, creating now this terror on the West with ISIS in a similar manner that occurred in the past. And all I'm trying to show you is that you're getting a rotten look at history when you watch the news channels. Now, there's today European royals and others. So now look at this story. This is reported by a woman who brought this story out. The European royals and others associated with the Vatican are charged with hunting down naked teens and murdering them, cutting off the boys' you-know-what. Now, according to Josephine, her husband, and other members of the Octopus, the local slang term for the Ndrangheta, today's born-again mafia, provided 10 children and adolescents who were hunted down and killed and then mutilated by wealthy men in forests near Belgium in the spring of 2000 and 2004. And it says this: I was there. I saw the whole thing. I was told they were kids from the juvenile detention centers in Brussels. They were let loose naked in the forest and hunted down and shot. Killers included, they're naming some people here. After they shot down the young ones, they cut off the boys' you-know-whats, and they hung them up like trophies, cheering and applauding. While confirmed by other insiders, these grisly accounts can distract from the bigger story and motives behind the crime. Obtains, according to Matteo Macchio, a radical member of the Italian parliament, he says child fodder is attained through its involvement with child snatching, Roman Catholic Church, and top Vatican officials. Now, we just touched the iceberg on a lot of that, of what, we've reported on many other things that have gone on. But the relationship, boy, this is one day where I've got to answer phones, do the whole thing. Yes. Hey, wait a second. I'm on the radio, okay? Bye. Oh, I get people calling all the time, live radio. They want to talk about mattresses while I'm talking about my show, but that's why sometimes I don't take callers. But anyway, I will call back in a moment. For the Jesuits and the Vatican, now the relationship to the occult must be emphasized. For without it, a significant purpose of so ghastly a thing as beheadings could be only guessed at. This would not occur, even on the Muslim side. Who created all this? For the Jesuits and Vatican, intentional murders and genocides have not changed, but are now heavily cloaked in helping agencies and laws. Food safety and all this other stuff. You look at everything that, like I said, the tactics have changed. But the aim hasn't. What about the Ebola false flag? U.S. bioweapons labs created Ebola, perhaps, and through forced UN vaccinations programs have suddenly appeared in scattered places in West Africa. Not the normal progression of an actual epidemic. This group, the WHO, they call them, and I forgot, the World Health Organization, that's right, is also getting countries to use military to quarantine villages with no one allowed, but no food and medical help going on. Very much like what George Bush did to the black people after Katrina. A HARP-created hurricane, perhaps. These quarantines might even be thought of as medieval sieges in which the enemy stopped supplies from getting in. Only today, with Ebola, the enemy, which triggered the disease, used as the justification for siege, is allowed to enter to infect the population under the guise of helping. The Jesuit Vatican partners in child genocide and occult sacrifice include European royalty, American royalty, and prominent church and government officials in England, Italy, Belgium, Holland, Ireland, Canada, and the U.S., to name a few. The very same combination of criminals were part of the Vatican's destruction of millions of people around the world. And remember this, the Papal Bull of 1455, which authorized Catholic nations to reduce to servitude an infidel people. In order to appease hostilities, arbitration was needed. They sought the assistance of the Vatican. It was the logical and natural choice in an age when the papacy was still unchallenged by person or kingdom. The Christian Church was independent of any earthly powers. The Vatican, with its hierarchy of popes, deacons, and bishops, believed that the Church, like God, was perfect and incapable of reform. Ecclesiastic authority successfully kept the masses on the straight and narrow path through the fear of spiritual agony. Let me check the time here as we roll on, and we only got about a minute to go. And let me just see if I can conclude this in 45 seconds. What I was trying to do is sketch you a look. at really where this all is coming from now, this war on terror and what we're seeing on the news every day. And to do a little bit more history lesson. Now, you may decide you don't agree with this. I'd like to hear it. You may decide you do. But I'm telling you, you're not getting the story in the sanitized version that you're getting on our news channels and in the sanitized versions that you're getting in our history books that have been rewritten, just like the Vatican is busy rearranging the Bible in many different formats. And all of you Bible believers who read and know this will verify that some of the editions out there have taken out very important things in the Word of God. Well, we're all out of time. Good night, and see you next Monday.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased. It has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.